Hello guys and welcome to another video. I will be recapping season 1 of Motherland Fort Salem. Along with that, I'll be offering analysis on certain events that happened. Before we start though, I'd like to ask if you are not already subscribed to please hit the subscribe button, and if you get any value out of this video to please also drop a like. It would be much appreciated. So the show follows 3 cadets who enlist in the United States Army, where the army is very much on edge because of a perceived enemy called the Spree. The Spree is this extremist group who has actively been committing various attacks on the civilian population. Now everything isn't as it seems, as we will later find out. So at the beginning of the series, we meet most of the main players. We meet Raelle, Abigail, and Teri, her love interest Scylla, and fellow members of the army, Sergeant Anacostia Quartermain, who is their drill sergeant, General Alda, who is the leader of the United States Army, and then we also meet Petra Bellwether, who is Abigail's mother, who also holds prominent rank in the army as well. So eventually, after the girls make it to boot camp, after saying the words, which is essentially equivalent to the oath of enlistment in the modern day military, they are grouped into a unit together, and they quickly learn that they absolutely did not join for the exact same reasons, and they absolutely do not get along. Abigail joins out of tradition because her family is just a military family. They all join, they take pride in it. Teri joins out of a sense of duty. She truly believes that serving in the military and helping others is a higher calling. She actually had a deferment to actually not join because the matriarchal line of her family is actually dying out, and the matriarchal line in this universe is what actually holds the power of their magic. And finally, Raelle just joins because she really doesn't care anymore, and she just wants to die a very quick death. I wish I had more to speak on at this point, but that is all we know at the beginning of the season. So in this series, it mostly follows the story of Raelle. The other girls and their stories are important too, but most of the things that happen really follow her story and the decisions she makes. So as I pointed out before, Raelle joins the army and she wants to die early. This is because she truly does not trust the system, and she truly believes that the army does not care about the witches serving defending their great country. What really affects her though is her mother actually died in combat a year before she actually says the words and joins the army. But this isn't solely what sows her distrust in the army. What actually sows her distrust is really the letters that her mom sent her while she was in combat. She sent some letters that basically just spoke bad of the army. She was just like sowing seeds of doubt, and like there's just a lot of dissent. And first I was like, oh, her mom was just like a disgruntled army person, but as we will see further down into the season, it really, like, this has some great significance, so pay attention to this. On top of everything, the mission that Raelle's mother dies on is actually the mission that is led by Petra, who's Abigail's mother, and Raelle fully blames Petra again because the letters that her mother sent her, it basically said like, our leaders don't value us and they're really just sending us to die. If Raelle wasn't getting along with the girls before, this piece of information that she received from her mother really wasn't helping. So all this creates a perfect storm for Scylla to actually meet Raelle. Raelle actually meets Scylla while she was skipping training. Like, she literally walked out while they were in the middle of training. But anywho, she really is committed to dying in a blaze of glory. Scylla is actually a witch who is 1 year further into training than Raelle. And at first you're like, oh, Raelle meets this lovely girl, and you're like, oh, they kind of hit it off, right? But no, because Scylla is actually Spree, that extremist group that I mentioned in the overview, and apparently she was embedded to somehow recruit Raelle or to deliver Raelle to the Spree. At this point, it's not apparent why the Spree wants Raelle, but she was solely embedded. Imagine being embedded for a full year ahead of time just so you could deliver this one person to the Spree. So Scylla slowly integrates herself into Raelle's life. You know, she really tries to show that she identifies with her mom dying, because Scylla's parents also died. They were actually killed by the army apparently, and she's really kind of lightly sows the seed of discourse, you know, to make sure she stays separated from her unit. And it works. You know, if I wasn't watching the show, I don't think I would have sleuted out exactly what Scylla was doing, so I could totally see how everybody else didn't realize. The only person who really had any suspicion of Scylla was Anacostia, and pretty much everybody could chalk that up to her being a drill sergeant and really just wanted to make sure Raelle succeeded. Scylla does everything she can to make sure that Raelle is emotionally attached to her, you know, often creating moments to really foster that emotional connection. At one point, she also impersonates a senior officer while Raelle is on guard duty, and she basically tells Raelle all these things to make sure Raelle knows that, hey, you should really get to know Scylla. She's actually a good person once you get to know her, really making sure that she's pushing Raelle towards her. What I think Scylla was not expecting is that she would have actually developed feelings for Raelle. I don't know if these feelings necessarily would have changed Scylla's ideology, because I know normally that's a narrative that is pushed, love overcomes all, but Scylla is pretty deep-rooted in her hate for the army, and she's really committed to the Spree's cause. So I don't actually know if this would have helped at all with deprogramming Scylla. It's not something that was explored in season 1. So eventually we come to a point in the season where it's time for Scylla to deliver Raelle to the Spree. It's actually at Abigail's cousin's wedding, and of course, because Scylla develops feelings for Raelle, she actually chooses not to deliver Raelle to the Spree. Again, I don't think that this changes any of Scylla's feelings. I just think she wasn't willing to give up Raelle. Anywho, before Scylla decides that she's not going to give up Raelle, she actually goes to the restroom where she starts talking to this balloon in a mirror, which, by the way, is how the Spree communicates, and I have a weird affinity for balloons and inflatables. But basically, you know, the balloon basically lays out the plan of what they were going to do with Raelle. But coincidentally, Tali was actually in the bathroom crying. For another reason, it's not really, I don't think it's really vital to the story, so I'm not really gonna mention it here. But Tali was in the bathroom and she witnesses all of this. So she tells Anacostia, and Anacostia is like, oh, well, everything I suspected is confirmed, right? So because she decides that she is not going to hand Raelle over, the Spree actually orchestrates an attack. And I'm not sure if this attack was going to happen anyway, but it's an attack that happens. And during all of this, they actually kill Chevelle, which is Abigail's cousin. They actually cut out her vocal cords, and then also they send a massive amount of balloons, which doesn't really do what it's supposed to do, because there are a lot of high level witches at this wedding, and they pretty much stop the attack. But in all of the chaos, Scylla dies. And I say that in quotations, but because obviously she doesn't die, and as we later find out, Anacostia actually took her into custody. But at this point, Abigail, Raelle, or Tali, they don't know what happens to her. All they know is she's gone. So now Raelle is just in a tailspin because the love of her life is missing. You know, she doesn't want to believe that anything malicious happened to her, but she's literally gone. So Raelle takes all this time to go looking for her, and eventually she wanders down to the Necro basement. This is where Necro does all their training, and she happens upon this big mushroom, like this big fungus growing on a wall. And for the life of me, I can't understand why Raelle would touch this thing on the wall, but she does, and it's weird. Yeah. I definitely thought that this is going to have some significance down the line. While Raelle is here, after, you know, she touched that mushroom, Isadora walks in on her, who is the Necro training instructor, and this is where the real like lie and deception really begins. Isadora basically tells her that they actually found out that Scylla is dead, which again is not true, because we know for a fact that they took her into custody, right? And if Raelle wasn't spinning out before, she was definitely spinning out now. So while all this is happening, I was really conflicted in my feelings. On one hand, I was happy because Scylla is lying, evil, she's, you know, an extremist, so I'm happy that she's gone, they caught her. But on the other hand, the amount of pain that Raelle was going through, it really made me feel for her. It's like really sad. Like, I can't tell you how many times I cried. But on the other hand though, this really made for some of the show's best scenes in my opinion. There was actually this one scene where Raelle takes this thing called Salva. It's a military drug that they use to help them float during combat drops, and she basically takes a whole bunch of it to go to this beach to hopefully find Scylla, because again, Raelle is still in denial. She does not believe Scylla is dead. At this point, everybody's thinking she's crazy, so, you know, she goes off on her little floaty thingy. The music they used, the cinematography, it was absolutely excellent in the scene. At some point, we had the arrival of these two witches, Adil and Khalida. They actually arrive at Fort Salem because Khalida is actually very sick and they were hoping that the army would be able to help them. Adil and Khalida belong to this nomadic group of witches who hold some very powerful songs and they don't really share it with anyone. So Alder, General Alder, the leader of the US Army, thinks this is the perfect opportunity for her to somehow get them to give up their songs so she could use it in war. Mind you, she just told other military leaders from different countries that, hey, we should leave them alone, let them be, let them preserve their culture. But again, General Alder, she's always manipulating somebody, and in my opinion, she is low-key a narcissist. So the US Army attempts to help Khalida, they attempt to heal her, but to no avail. They just kind of figure it out. So they end up really staying at Fort Salem for a very extended amount of time. And while they're here, Adil actually meets Abigail and they start a very intimate relationship. It doesn't seem significant now, but it has an effect on how future events will play out in the story. So because Abigail and Adil now develop this really strong bond, Adil trusts Abigail even though him and his people aren't very trusting of military. They're very much against war. And Abigail convinces Adil that Raelle could actually help Khalida, that she could actually fix her. So he says yes because again, he trusts Abigail, and of course Raelle does what she's supposed to do. She heals her. Khalida is very thankful to Raelle for saving her life. And after Raelle heals Khalida, I thought this is maybe the reason why the Spree wanted her, because they maybe knew how powerful she was, and I wish this was it, but it's not, as we will find out later in the season. So there comes a time in every cadet's training where they go to this training exercise called Citydrop. It's where they use everything they've learned so far to neutralize a fake enemy. So the exercise starts with them having to jump out of this helicopter. That's why they call it Citydrop, LOL. Everybody makes it to the ground pretty much safely except Tali. So Tali actually lands, and she lands badly, and she kind of like breaks. I think she breaks her leg. I think it was a break, right? As we know, Raelle is a very powerful fixer, so of course she attempts to help Tali because Tali is in her unit that is her sister at this point, because at this point they all resolve their feelings and they pretty much get along with each other. So Raelle attempts to fix Tali's leg, which she does, but in doing so she actually sees the memory Tali has of Scylla talking to that balloon in the mirror, and Raelle actually finds out that Tali was the one that told Anacostia that Scylla was Spree. Of course here, Raelle is still recovering from learning that Scylla might be dead, so she's still very much in denial, and she just cannot believe this. She absolutely thinks Tali's a liar, which in my opinion, how could she even think that, because she just saw what Tali saw, so the logic doesn't make sense. But grief does things to people, and she just was not willing to believe it. So now that she's found this out, she is on a mission to find Anacostia, because as far as she's concerned, Anacostia is probably the only person that knows where Scylla is, because at this point Raelle knows that Scylla is definitely alive and she isn't actually dead. So the training exercise goes on, and coincidentally Raelle actually finds that officer that Scylla impersonated while she was on guard duty, and she's like, hey, I know you, and this officer's like, no you don't, I've never met you. And this is where the denial starts to unravel. She's like, whoa, well, no, if she's saying she's never met her and all they talked about was Scylla, then Scylla might actually be Spree. Eventually she finds Anacostia, and Anacostia basically asks her a series of questions along with that lieutenant. They eventually drive it home to Raelle that Scylla is actually Spree, and Raelle finally comes to terms with it, and she also finds out that Scylla is really actually alive and that they're holding her, trying to get information out of her. So because everything's already gone to crap, it has to get worse. While Scylla has been in lockup, Anacostia had actually been interrogating her for information, and she eventually did get a hold of some information that did pan out, and basically the military finds out that the Spree is planning this attack and this is where their home base is at. So they attempt to stop them, but of course the Spree, being who they are, they blew up a building and everyone that was there died, and now there's no one hot on their tracks. So coincidentally, the only people close enough to stop them are the cadets at Citydrop. And of course, they're ill-prepared, but a threat is a threat and the threat must be stopped. So at this point, I'm like, these cadets are about to die. I don't think they're ready, but nevertheless, they go on. So their mission is to stop 2 trucks carrying bombs, and they actually stopped the first truck without any casualties, and I was like actually amazed. I was like, okay, maybe they can do this, but you know, that bliss only lasted for a second because the next truck actually had civilians in it, and you know, Tali actually uses her gift of sight and she actually sees the civilians. She gives this information to Anacostia, and Anacostia relays it back to Alder, but of course, you know, Alder is like, no, they're acceptable losses, and she's like, carry on with the attack, and they do. They wind strike the truck, and the truck basically turns to dust. Threat that was in there along with all these civilians are now dead, and again, we know who Tali is, right? She joined the army to help people, and this just is not it. After the military drop at Citydrop, Alda decides she's going to give this address to all the cadets, and she basically tells them like, hey, what happened today was a win, it was a success. She's like really selling it, and then she basically lies and says that she found out about the civilians after the fact. And of course, this does not sit right with Tali, because again, you know, Tali, she joined for the right reasons, and this was not it. So because this doesn't sit right with Tali, she tells Abigail and Raelle, because now Tali is remembering what secrets did to her before when she kept the information about Scylla from them. So she tells them like, hey, I saw the civilians in that truck, I told them, and they still went on with the attack anyway. So this is now just like making them realize how out of control Alder really is, and how she's willing to do anything to make sure everything she does is a success. Again, I low-key think she's a narcissist. But anywho, the girls take this information to Petra. They tell her like, hey, these civilians were killed, even though Tali told them there were civilians in that truck, and Petra shockingly just brushes it off, which was weird because she and Alder really never got along. So for her to just dismiss the information was really weird. So because Petra isn't listening, they decide to up the ante by telling her about Scylla, and for some reason this is a thing that breaks the camel's back. But Petra's like, oh no, we can't have Spree infiltrating our ranks. She goes on to give, you know, the president of the United States this information, who in turn decides that she's actually going to forcibly remove Alder from a position and actually give the position to Petra. But alas, Alder has actually been in power for over 300 years. So she's not gonna let something as small as the president not wanting her to be the leader of the army stop her. So later that night, where the president is about to make the announcement that, hey, Alder is about to be replaced by Petra, Alder actually puppets the president. So while the president is giving her speech, Alder actually just takes over her body and basically props herself up as this great leader. But that's basically how Alder holds on to power. And of course, something like this doesn't just happen without anybody who's not supposed to witness it. And that person, that lucky person today, was Anacostia, and all of this really just forces Anacostia to come to terms with the person she thought Alder was. You know, Anacostia really looked up to Alder, but this really makes her like really think about like, is this the woman that I really want to be following? You know, can she be trusted? Now we arrive at graduation day, where cadets find out if they will be shipped off to the front lines or if they will move on to War College to become an officer. And of course, you know, all the events that just happened, you know, the betrayal and Alder trying to hold on to her power. Alder now feels like she needs to really assert her dominance, so she does the only thing she can do. She actually makes sure that the Bellwether unit is sent to the front lines, even though they are arguably one of the best units at this point. Now, of course, Petra being Petra, she makes sure that Abigail is actually given a place at War College after the fact. But because Abigail and the rest of the girls really have grown as a unit and they've really nurtured that sisterly bond, she actually chooses to go on with her unit on the front lines and serve with them in combat. So immediately after graduation, they are given a assignment, and it's an assignment to actually rescue Adil's and Khalida's people. Adil and Khalida actually personally request that the 3 of them accompany them, because along with those 3, Alder and her people actually will be going also. And again, Adil and Khalida, they don't trust anybody else except them, so it was really important that they accompanied them on the mission. So they go on this up, and immediately, you know, you could tell that something is not right. But because it's the military, the op must go on whether or not they sense that they're in danger. At a certain point in the operation, Alder tries to explain herself to the Bellwether unit it, but it's going to take a long time for them to re-earn her trust, because on top of killing civilians, she also puppeted the president, which by the way Anacostia told them, so they actually know who they were dealing with. Eventually they find Adil's people, and Raelle is actually able to heal their sick. So now that they found them, they're like, okay, well, we need to take you to safety, because again, there's like something just not right about this place. So they exit the cave, and as soon as they do this, Tali is like, there are people here and they don't mean any good, right? They're a threat. So now they're racing to get back to the helicopters, and to the right up on this mountaintop, they actually see 3 of their people. I think it was 3, but 3 of the people tied to stakes, right? Like literal witches tied to stakes. So we all know what's about to happen, and these people make themselves known. They like step out of the shadows, but there aren't any shadows. They basically just set these witches on fire. So in this moment, we actually find out that, you know, these people on the spree, right? It's actually the Camarilla, and at this point Alda is like shocked, right? Because she thought she had extinguished the Camarilla back in the day. It's their ancient enemy, and she really thought that they didn't exist or pose a threat to them anymore. So, you know, naturally a fight ensues, and one of Alda's biddies is actually killed. So a biddy is a witch that voluntarily gives up her life force to Alda and becomes a part of her, I guess, right-hand team, but they basically give up their life essence to ensure that Alda lives, and that's how she's been able to stay in power for about 300 years now. So after the biddy is killed, Alda actually starts to grow old and die on the spot. So of course, you know, Tali, being who she is, even with all these unresolved feelings that she has for Alda, actually offers herself up to become a new biddy to help keep her alive. And of course, you know, Alda, being who she is and really trying to make sure she's the one that's in power and she's the one that's running the show, accepts it. And let me tell you, I personally think Tali is the real MVP of all of season 1. She's by far my favorite character personally, because she's so selfless and she really is just doing everything for the right reasons. After Alda is fine, the fight continues. Eventually, mostly everybody's able to make it to the helicopter. The helicopter is now getting ready to take off, and this kid decides, you know, kids are, they just like, they do whatever they want, right? He hops out because he's too scared to be in a helicopter, which is understandable. They're nomads, they don't really interact with modern day technology. So the kid hops out, and Raelle follows him, and then also Abigail follows Raelle. Raelle is actually able to convince the kid to go back to the helicopter, so she hands him off to Abigail, and Abigail takes him back. And as Raelle turns to return to the helicopter herself, she's actually stabbed through the heart. Let me tell you, the sound that left my body in this moment, it was just not human. And honestly, this is a moment I should have seen coming, but for some reason I didn't. Abigail then attempts to save Raelle's life, but she quickly realizes that she cannot move Raelle, so Raelle can't go back to the helicopter, and now the helicopter doesn't have any time. Like, they can't wait for them, so the helicopter takes off, and Abigail lays there holding Raelle's hand, trying to heal her, and they say, I love you, and you really feel it in that moment, because in the beginning, Abigail and Raelle, they just did not get along. And I was like, there's no way they're about to kill 2 main characters off in the season finale. Like, I just cannot. So helicopter takes off, and everybody, just like me, was thinking, what the hell is about to happen? In that moment, there was this massive explosion, right? And I was just like, what in the world? So the show comes back after break after this, and it's just Raelle and Abigail holding hands, and they're walking, and as they're walking, there's just mushrooms following them everywhere, and they're like giving off this massive energy. What I could only think in this moment what that was is, remember that mushroom thing that Raelle touched? Whatever it is connecting Raelle to the earth, and it's actually what's keeping her alive and giving her a lot of the power that she has. So after Raelle doesn't die and Abigail tries to save her, this pretty much ends the season. The only thing after that that's worth mentioning is Anacostia actually lets Scylla get away. She does this to follow Scylla to wherever she goes back to, and of course she goes back to a spree house. And you know, I was like, you know, all this is predictable. Of course this is what will happen, but the kicker was, she gets to the house and she, for the first time, meets the person who has been giving her all these orders to bring Raelle. Like, she needs to deliver Raelle to the spree. And guys, again, it was another moment that I should have seen coming, but the events of the season was so well planned. I remember in the beginning of the season, I had like an inkling, but then it was like dismissed with everything that was happening. And the person giving the orders was actually Raelle's mom. So all this dissent that she was planting into Raelle was actually just her hoping that she would get Raelle to convert over to becoming part of the Spree, which, you know, clearly didn't work. Anywho, that's how the season ends. You know, we find out that Raelle's mother leads a certain portion, if not all, of the Spree. So before I give my conclusion, I actually wanted to mention the Spree and the Camarilla. At the beginning of the season, I think like everybody else, just perceived the Spree to be the enemy of the United States Army and basically the whole world, right? But I think like analyzing their actions on the back end, like you really realize that maybe they were just really trying to warn other witches of the Camarilla, which they are humans and they're actually witch hunters. There actually was a point in the show where they blew up a soccer ball at a soccer game, and all it did was made the humans chant the ancient enemy has returned. And of course, you know, Alda writes it off because, you know, she again is convinced that she already got rid of the Camarilla like years and years ago, right? Also, there was the incident of the attack on Chevelle's wedding, you know, Abigail's cousin, where she died, which at this point the Spree really wasn't a group that ever targeted witches. They always seem to indiscriminately attack humans only. So I think that was another inkling that hey, you know, things are happening. And you know, this attack on Chevelle also led to them discovering that a lot of the Bellwether line specifically was being killed, even people who they may have been connected to the line at some point, but really they didn't have the work in their blood. They didn't have any magical inklings, right? But again, it was all wrote off like couldn't possibly be the Camarilla because Alda had wiped them out, supposedly. All I'm saying is, in the beginning, everyone perceived the Spree to be, you know, this evil thing, which, you know, I think they are, because there's no reason to be just going around killing people, right? But really, what I think eventually they were trying to achieve was to warn their fellow witches that, like, hey, there's this entity out there killing witches and nobody's paying attention, and it's really just the Camarilla slowly gaining power. Those are, like, you know, just facts that nobody could really deny at this point. So in conclusion, you know, Motherland for Salem, it was really hyped up. You know, I think we waited like almost a year from the first trailer for the actual season to premiere. I like that Freeform didn't try to dim the effects of the show by giving it a PG rating. I really enjoyed, you know, everything that they put into it. I loved the emotions it had. I loved the world building, the universe building, the plot building. I think it was really well done. It was really intricate. They didn't only pay attention to the visuals of the show, but they also paid attention to the soundtrack. If you have a chance, like, I think if you haven't even seen this season, you'd probably enjoy it. I know I did. I listened to it very frequently, just, you know, driving to work normally. But again, you know, I really enjoyed it. I'm excited for season 2. There's just so many avenues to explore, so many plot lines to develop. I know with everything going on in the world right now, a lot of TV shows filming is severely delayed. I'm hoping for 2021 season 2 premiere, but I am not going to hold my breath. But I am patiently waiting, and I will be watching season 2 when it does finally come out. So alright guys, that is it from me. If you got any value out of this video, please drop a like, and again, if you're not subscribed and you'd like to see more videos from me, please hit the button and also ring the notification bell so you will know when I post. And as always, if you've reached this point in the video, today Tali is the real MVP, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.